What are we going to do today? We're going to finish part 3 of the Serger Quickie quilt that we started in the last 2 weeks. So anyway, what I did last week is I put my center together, and actually I did a little bit more. Today's class we're going to be doing on the sewing machine. Because Tuesday, yeah, it was Tuesday, my Serger locked up. I think it's got another the gears are loose, and which I've done one time before. According to Justin, I'm the only person on earth who has ever vibrated the gears loose on a Serger, and that was years ago when I had the Imagine. It did the same thing, so I think I did it again. So it's repeatable, but 2 different machines. And if there's a way to break the machine, I'm going to find it. And I don't just do little breaks, you know, needle threader, no big deal, needs oiling, no big deal, tension's off, no big deal. I break gears. When I break big time. So we'll see what happens next week. I'll just sort of, here's how mine looks so far. And I ended up having to finish this on the sewing machine. And what we're going to do tonight, we're also going to finish it on a regular sewing machine using the walking foot. So you don't have to have a Serger, but it's annoyingly slow. Part of my problem with the Serger is that I learned to sew on a commercial machine. So if it says that the machine stitches at 1200 stitches per minute, by God, that's how fast I'm going to sew. And I usually do. In fact, sometimes, like with my regular sewing machines, which is why this one, which is the equivalent of the Jane, mine's older, it's called a Quilter's Pro, stitches at 1200 stitches per minute, and it sometimes annoys me by going a little too slow. I learned to sew on a commercial factory machine, and it flies. It did fly when it was alive. It's gone now. So anyway, so see how it looks rather Bargello-like, and I think it turned out really cute. So now we're going to put the borders on, and I've already put 2 borders on. So usually you are left, turn it around, with the ends like this, okay? So what you would do is you would go ahead and, oh, here, wait a minute, I pinned this one, so let me unpin it. Okay, so you are left with the raw edge. So you're going to treat these 2 side borders, the ones on the sides, the same as if it were a 4-inch strip, where you would put, that's the back. You would put it together, front to front, flip it over, put the back to the back, right sides together with the batting on the bottom, and clip them like usual. Then you would take it and then sew it. Now if I'm sewing it, I'm using the edge of my foot, so I don't like to do a 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to stitch 3/8 of an inch, like that. And I did 2 rows, mostly because this is a baby quilt, and therefore they're gonna it's gonna take some hard abuse. Lots of washing and dragging around the floor. So I put 2 rows of stitching, which is what the 4-thread Serger does. The 4-thread Serger is going to put 2 rows of stitching. The only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't encase the edges. But who cares? That's going to be inside anyway. So after you've sewn that, you would again open it up and press it. And I've already done that. Okay? And you can baste it together if you want. It is not necessary to. And then you're going to work on the end pieces. And so when you get to the end pieces, this is where you're going to want to trim it. Because see how it's uneven up here? Move that out of the way. So what I want to do is I'm going to find my shortest spot, which I think is right here. And I'm going to take my ruler. Roll it out from under the table. This is one of those creative grids. It's one of my favorite rulers because it's got that frosting on the back. See how it's got frosting? And I think we have these at the store, but these are my favorite brand of rulers because it sort of helps to grip. If not, you could do other things to make your rulers grip a little better. You can, they have this Invisigrip paper. I don't think I've got any here because I don't like it. It's like a plastic film you put on the back. It's made by Omnigrid or Olfa, I can't remember which, but it doesn't work very well. You can also take little dots of sandpaper, I don't know what that's for, or double stick tape or anything. You can even, if things are really slippery, take these pieces of Rubbermaid drawer liner and you can put them underneath. I'll get 2 of them. And see, now this ruler's not moving. In fact, it's moving the board instead. Okay, so I'll just do that for now. Okay, so what I'm doing is I want to look at 2 things. I want to find my lowest spot, and I'm going to look across the whole top to find my lowest spot. And sometimes I misjudge it, so therefore I will have to trim it twice, and that's okay. So you have all this pressed open. The top you don't have to press because it's pretty secure in there. So I'm going to go here. So there's my lowest spot, right here. Then I'm going to take one line of the ruler and run it down a seam, because that one knows that tells me I have it square. And then I'm going to take my trusty, we call it rotary cutter. I'm going to move it down a little bit. I want a line to follow. Doesn't matter which line you follow. Actually, it turns out when I follow the line down, this orange one is my lowest spot. I'm keeping things 90 degrees. I'm just going to trim away the top. Helps to unlock the rotary cutter. One thing I like about these, using the Rubbermaid drawer mats, the drawer liner as grippers, that didn't slide at all. And it doesn't impede the vision because you're just going to move it. And I usually do this on my cutting table because then I can get it in just one fell swoop. I don't have to move this a couple times. Okay, here's where I cut, so I'll put it even with that. Go down the seam, straight here, and we are still good. I'm not that concerned that this little half square maybe is bigger than that little half square. I don't care. Doesn't really matter, because sometimes you sew and it sort of torques a little bit in one direction. I don't care. It's all good. And then one more down here. Scoot down a little bit. Okay. And now this is the little bit left. And now my top is squared. Okay, and I can throw this away. Okay, now where's my... Now we're going to do the same thing we did before. Where I'm going to take my front, this is the front piece. And I'm going to cut off the selvage edge. On the side pieces, you are probably going to have to miter together. So let me do that first, because this may not be long enough, as I don't think it is. So I'm going to have to miter these pieces together. So here's what we do to miter. You can just sew them end to end, but I don't like to do that. I need my pressing surface, need my iron. Okay. Okay, I take one piece like this, and I fold it over and press it really good. Okay. Then I'm going to take this second piece here. Come back. And it doesn't matter what angle you fold it. What you want to avoid is this straight up and down line, because the eye is going to catch a straight up and down line. It's harder for the eye to see a diagonal line than it is a straight up and down. So this sort of fools the eye, even though I don't have these exactly matching. So I'll take this to the end. Lay it over to the part where it seems the least noticeable to you. And you can always line that up. And I think I'll move it forward just a little bit. Now, if this had doesn't have to be 45 degrees. It can be any angle, just as long as it's not straight up and down. Okay, and then I'm going to use my glue. And I'm going to use Elmer's washable school glue, and you want to use anything that's got a small tip. I got this one from, I think, Quilter's Rule, but I haven't seen it in a long time. Roxanne makes a good glue that has a tiny tip to it. You can use an old oiler as long as you clean it out really well so there's no oil in the glue, which is, you know, these little pencil oilers. So then I'm going to just fold this back. I'm just going to put a tiny bead of glue. And I'm going to just flip that over. Make sure it's aligned and heat set it into place. I did turn it on. And once it's heated, it's going to stick. So not to shift it, then I'll do the other side. See, it's already stuck there. But it really is not much wider than a hair, hardly at all. And this is how you can get perfect miters. This is also really good if you're trying to match up stripes, because then you can fold over your stripe, move it along where you need it to go, glue them together, and then everything matches up. Especially if you're trying to miter a corner, it's great. Okay. And then you go to the machine. You want your stitch length to be about 1.5 to 2, so you want a short stitch length on a straight stitch. So, then you open this up and you can see where the line is, where that fold is? See the fold? I'm just going to stitch right on that fold. I want a short stitch length because, get out of here. Sorry, that light was coming back. Okay. Then I'm going to take this, the fold here, and pop the glue. First pop your glue, then trim your seam. It's just a little hard to grab that. And I like to sew mine at about 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to cut. No, we can't see. So I pop the glue. Here we go. Alright, then I'm going to cut about 1/2 inch. You could use a rotary cutter. So now I'm just pressing it. Okay, now we're going to go back and we're going to put this thing together with the clips just like we did the sides. So here's the top. Okay, so we do like we did before. Put top front to front, and this just goes across the top, and we get the clips. So I'm over here, and I just start clipping it. on the edge. Okay. I've already put the miter on the back, so now I'm going to flip this over. To the wrong side. And I think the wrong side turned out really cute too. These colors are just so bright and cheerful. I like these. We need some bright and cheerful right now. And here's the back. And I didn't clip this salvage. Yeah, I did. Here's one. I took the selvage off one end. Then I'm going to put my back to back right sides together. Put the batting on the top, or on the, actually on the very bottom, but this is wrong side facing me, remember? So I'm not dealing with an extraordinary space. You don't have to have a big cutting table. Now to the sewing machine. Okay. And I'm going to change the walking foot. So I'm going to remove, with this model I've got to remove the screw entirely that holds the presser foot on. Then I put this on, start to put it around the shank here. And make sure that this little fork right here goes over top of the needle bar. And screw it in, and that's all we need. There. Alrighty, and I've just put gray thread on here so I don't have anything. Doesn't have to be any special color, just as long as it blends or blends with the fabrics. Okay. Let me get this so I can put these back. Now setting my stitch length to about a 2 to 2.5 millimeters. So I'm going to make it. We had it 1.5 for the miter, and the reason I had the stitch so small is because it's a little tiny. It's all on the bias, and I don't want that to pull out. So therefore, if I have smaller stitches, it's harder to pull the stitches out. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure everything is nice and even. This is where it gets a little big. And then this is about a 3/8 inch stitch. A 3/8 inch seam using this particular foot. Every walking foot is going to be about different. So you're going to have to do a test in order to see, you know, how big 3/8 is. So the walking foot doesn't like high speed either. You gotta slow down, which is hard for me to do. Get some of this out of the bulk, out of the way. Just go at an even pace. Go over there. Okay, and because this is for a baby, I'm going to run a second row of stitching just a little bit closer, in sort of halfway between. There we go. Okay. There we go. Then we go back to the iron and we press it all open again. And that's the one thing I like about the Martelli mats, is that if you don't use steam, you actually can, so you can with light, not really hot iron, with a medium hot iron, you can just go ahead and press right on the surface and not warp it. A lot of times I like to take it to the ironing board and put steam on it to make this final one nice and crisp. And then this side. Have a little bit of room. A little bit of playroom. I don't have to match anything up. We're, in all intents and purposes, done. You just have to put the binding on. Now first I'm gonna square it up. And with this one, it's easy to square this up. Okay. So I am going to start over here in a corner. Okay, and when I have a corner, then I like to have a nice square block. And this is one of my square rulers. And my rotary cutter. And I'm going to now sort of, this is going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5 about. 5.5, so I'm going to make this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. So there's my 5.5, and I usually start with my corners. Okay. I'm just going to go down this side here. I'm not going to trim the whole thing because I'm going to show you how we're going to do the binding. I think I have another video that talks about how to do the binding. So again, I'm going to take this at 5.5 inches and just go down. I'm not going to be, this does not have to be show quality square. It's no big deal. Okay, I'm just going to go that far. I'm going to do all of it. I'll do the rest later. And throw those away. Okay, so now we want to make the binding. And I cut the binding. Where did I put it? Here it is. Okay, I'm going to use single fold binding. I am not going to double it. I'm going to single it. So the first thing I'm going to do is put these together. Again, this you would do the same way you would do the miter here, where you would take this, fold it, press it right here. Okay. I will take the glue again here. Okay, lay this over top. And I'm not worried about those selvages. I'm going to cut them up after I sew it. Heat set it down. And you see I have this two right sides together. I'm just going to sew that, and we treat it just like we did the other one. See how nice that looks? Okay, so I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm not going to sew it right now. So another thing I want to do is I want to just press an edge here on the end where you start. Don't have to glue that. Okay, I am going to also, well wait, let's do this first. I'm going to, since this is only going to be a single fold, I'm going to press about 1/4 inch down one side. And it's just finger, I mean, it doesn't have to be exact because you're going to adjust that as you sew your binding on. Okay, that should be enough for now. I'm going to repress that fold. This is at the beginning, so it's got a fold here 1/4 of an inch, and I'm just pressing that miter into place. Okay, now we're ready to start applying the, I'm not going to do the whole thing, I'm just going to do a little bit right now. Okay, so I want to start at a certain spot, so I'm going to put the glue. Within 1/4 of an inch of the edge. And that tiny little bit that goes with these tips is all you need. Okay, I'm going to extend that about 6 inches. I started gluing here, so I'm going to start in the middle about 6 inches away from the edge. And I'm just going to heat set it into place. This will glue baste it down. Okay. Then you're going to take this end, and this is the single edge against, nope, not seeing it. Here I am. Okay. So here, when I come to the end, and remember I only have a single layer here and a folded hem on this other side, and I'm working on the right side of the quilt. Then I'm going to, pull that, glue came pop loose. I'm going to run this edge even, like that. Heat set it down. At this point, I usually will pin it or whatever, just leave it. Then we go to the machine. So I'm coming over here, and I don't have to back tack because you really can't with a walking foot. Scoot back a little more. And usually I sew without this cutting mat on the table because that makes everything drag. So if you're having some problems, take the cutting mat off the table. So I'm going to sew about 3/8 of an inch from the edge because I'm using this foot. Now I cut my binding 1.5 inches. Depending on your walking foot, you may have to do a little bit of experimentation because you're going to need about a little over 1 inch to do the turnover and the sew down. Then what is your seam allowance? So. And I'm using 3/8, so which is 1 1/4, and then the other 1/4 is this turn down. So that's what I need. Okay. So I'm just going to sew to the end. When you get fairly close, you can see the fold. Here, I will make this darker with this pin, which is, I don't know if you can see that purple mark. Okay. There, nice and dark. Can you see that line? Okay, that's where I did the fold. Remember this fold over here? I am going to sew until the needle hits that line. And it's right there on maybe a little tiny bit more. Oop, that's too far, so scoot it back. Right there. Pivot. And sew somewhere into the diagonal, and then you can cut. Okay, so next I will just stand here and press. So over here, please don't fall off the table. Put some heavy things on there. Here's a drink. There, I'll keep it on the table. Okay, and then I am going to fold back. Okay, then fold it back on itself like this. Give it a little press. Put a little bit more of this 1/4 inch fold. Okay, and then I'm going to apply the glue. Usually I start in the corner and just take that extra step to do this twice. Usually I'll just do a little bit here. Get that corner in good, so you want the edge of the fold right there with the top of the quilt, or the side that you just are leaving. You set that down and then continue on. I'll go down a few inches. Okay. Do the same thing again. Do it all the way down the end, and you go till you come to the next corner, and then we sew it. Okay. I'm just going to sew this now. Okay, and then you just start off at the end, right at the very end, and just sew until you do the same thing, get to the other end. I'm just going to sew a few inches. Okay, that's all I'm going to sew for now, because I want to show you something here. Okay, so now when it comes to turning this over and to sew it, come here. I should have done a half-size quilt. This thing's huge. Big baby quilt. Okay, say you're sewing this now. So you would roll this over. If you can see that right here. Okay, so here's the front, here's the back. So I would roll this over until it curved. Up and down. If you are wanting to machine stitch the binding closed, okay, if I'm hand stitching it, I'm going to put this literally just over top of the stitching line, okay? But if I were stitching this, turn it over on the front and stitch in the ditch, instead of putting it right on this stitching line, I'm going to put it over by 1/8 of an inch. And then I would then clip, at this point, I would clip it, but then I would also glue it. Just like we glued the front, I would glue the back. I don't like mine stitched in the ditch. Then you would come over here and you would just stitch right in this ditch, and it would catch on that outside. It would just catch right there. But having this little bit of glue can make that stay. So you would, then when you come to a corner, you're going to just stitch to here or clip it. Then open this side, smash that open, or smash it flat. Then take this and look at the perfect miter I've got right here. And again, you could glue this tiny, tiny little bit of glue. Don't go crazy with the glue, because the more glue you put on there, if you're hand stitching it, you're going to have a hard time hand stitching through the glue. So very tiny bit. And I do mean tiny. So like, here, I'll do it on this blue so you can see. I literally wouldn't put any more, if you can see that, any more glue than that. That's almost nothing. And see how this would stitch. See if then it'll stay down. And see, it'll stay. If you decide to move it, it'll pop off. Okay, now when you come around to the end, where you're finishing off where you started. Okay, so you would have this sewn to about, if this is my beginning, and that came loose. I want that good and crispy. Okay, you would lay this like that. This is already sewn, say, to here. Let's say we're sewn to here. Okay, so that's where we're sewn. Just to clarify, the binding is put on with the sewing machine, not the serger. Yes, I almost, you can put your binding on with the serger, but it's very hard to get that mitered corner. So I usually put my binding on with the sewing machine. And today we're strictly sewing on the sewing machine because my serger's dead. Or very sick. Let's put it that way. In fact, it's seized up. Okay. So anyway, you have sewn to here. Can we see that? Yes, you've sewn to here. And we're going to lay this right over, and then you put this in place on this side. There's your fold. Then this is going to come right here, okay? So then we're going to take our glue, and I am going to glue this. I'm going to open this up first, okay? Okay, that's open up like that. Open up that hem. Place this glue right on the edge. Get it nice and straight. Open up the glue, put this on top of this one so that it fits exactly. Okay, heat set that together. And now you're going to pinch these ends together and clip them, mostly to keep it out of aggravation's way. Okay, and then, can we see that? Yeah, we can. Okay, then you open up your fold, sew this miter together, and I'll go ahead and do that real quick. Well, I'm going to put a bigger stitch because I'm going to have to take it out later. So I'm going to grab this so it's clipped together, and I'm going to sew right on the fold. Okay, so I've got everything flat, and I will go ahead and, where'd that friction pin go? Here is the line. Sew it together. Now I have one earlier, and I have to check and see which one it is, where I'm talking about binding a quilt, and that's talking about doing the same technique using the double fold, or the fold over regular quilt binding, the double binding. This is only a single binding. Okay, so now, then I would pop the seam just like before, clip it, but I'm not going to clip it right now because I've got to take it apart. Release my clip, and now when I pull this flat, I'll try to, when I pull this flat, come here, there we go. Move this around here, there we go. Oh heck, I'll clip it. I've got more binding. So we clip that. Press that seam open. So press this seam open. Refold this hem back down, and you can see now that's going to fit perfectly. It's not pressed, but can you see that? I can't tell, but you can see that right there. And see now, you would, now it would fit perfectly, and then you'd finish sewing your binding on. Finish where you start. And now when you turn, I didn't press it. Press that back. Yeah, I didn't leave enough room, but there we go. And then when you fold it over, and then you sew it as usual. Clip it down. You can press this if you like. And see, that would be an absolutely... I'm going to put my clips, here they are. And I dumped them all out. Okay. Just par from a day. And that's where it's not quite sewn. Okay, but I'll show you this as if it were joined. Again, you could glue it. I tend to sew this by hand on the back using a ladder stitch. I would just sew that closed using a whip stitch or a ladder stitch. And see now, I'll release that as if it was. And look, it's a perfect binding and it perfectly fits. Using this glue using glue basting that binding into place is going to make sure you have a nice flat binding and that it doesn't pull or twist. Because a lot of times bindings will twist and you'll see that little ripple that's going diagonally here, or pulling, and you can tell you have pulling if the corners of your quilt sort of cup upwards, then that means that you pulled this binding as you sew it on. So if you glue baste it into place, all the fabric is relaxed and therefore nothing is stretched, so you don't get any cupping of the corners, and the binding lays nice and flat. Another on the double binding, a good place to look if you can't find it on the videos that I had before, if you go to YouTube and look up Sharon Schomber, that's S-C-H-A-M-B-E-R. She has a YouTube series called Binding the Angel. I think it's part 1 and part 2. That's the method of quilt binding that I used 99.999% of the time. The only difference between what you're seeing today is that I am using a single layer of binding rather than that folded double layer. There's 2 reasons I use this. It's an old wives' tale that you put double binding on a quilt because the corners and the edges will wear off and you can replace the binding. Who do you know who's ever replaced the binding on their quilt? I never have. I've got quilts from the 1970s. I've never changed out the binding. I have had quilts go totally threadbare, and if they're going to go threadbare on the binding, they're going to go threadbare on the quilt itself. And you will find over time, because this is an easy to do quilt, this bulkiness that's in the seam, this is a particular wear point. This is not going to wear any faster. This isn't going to wear any faster than this. And I have a few quilts that are like literally shredded threads, and I have had to like hide them, wait till my husband goes out of town, and then they magically disappear, because this is his absolutely favorite quilt. And I think it's because it is so quick and easy. I don't stress over it if he spills coffee on it or if the cat sleeps on it. Well, it's not if the cat sleeps on it, it's when the cat sleeps on it. And if she ever lets you have it back. So anyway, that's why it's one of my favorite quilts to do. It's one of my favorite quilts to do for a baby, because I'm not stressed out spending 80 to 120 hours making a baby quilt that the kid's going to throw up on. You know, okay, one day I can handle that. So this is like, for utility, this is my favorite quilt to use, and we've got them literally all over the place. Okay, any questions? So I'm going to say goodbye for now.